frozen protocol's harmony's edge drifted silently through the void between worlds, its hull reflecting the distant glow of the Vorthic homeworld. Inside the sterile corridors, two species attempted an uneasy coexistence that neither fully understood. Zephyra moved through the ship with mechanical precision, her silver-blue skin catching the artificial light as she conducted her daily inspection rounds. Captain James Blackwood watched her from the observation deck, noting how she never paused, never showed curiosity about the human crew members who stepped aside as she passed. Her people had engineered emotion out of themselves centuries ago, leaving behind beings of pure logic and efficiency. To Zephyra, the humans aboard this vessel were fascinating in their inefficiency, constantly driven by impulses she couldn't comprehend. "Another successful patrol report," she announced, her voice carrying the same monotone inflection as always. James nodded, but something in his expression made her pause. He was studying her with an intensity that seemed almost concerned. "When did you last eat?" he asked, the question catching her off guard. Nutrition consumption occurred precisely. 14 hours ago, she replied automatically. James smiled, a gesture that always puzzled her. "That's not what I meant. Come with me." Against her better judgment, Zephyra followed him to the mess hall. The warm lighting and scattered tables filled with laughing crew members created an atmosphere entirely foreign to her sterile quarters. James disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a small golden pastry that emanated an intoxicating aroma. "My grandmother's recipe," he said, placing it before her. "Apple cinnamon, baked fresh this morning." Zephyra examined the offering suspiciously. "This exceeds standard nutritional requirements. Just trust me," James said softly. "One bite." She lifted the pastry, noting its imperfect shape, the way cinnamon sparkled on its surface. The first bite should have been simple data: sugar content, temperature, texture. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Warmth spread through her chest, and for a moment, she could almost see a kitchen she'd never known. Smell bread baking in an oven that existed only in James's memories. Her hand trembled as she sat down. "The pastry? What is this?" James leaned closer, his eyes bright with understanding. "It's the first step toward being alive." Zephyra's carefully constructed emotional barriers began to crack, letting in sensations she had no words for. The taste lingered on her tongue like a promise of something beautiful and dangerous, something her people had sacrificed long ago in their pursuit of perfect logic. Breaking barrier sleep eluded Zephyra that night as her mind processed the impossible experience. Her conditioning should have immediately suppressed any emotional response. Yet she found herself returning to the memory of that simple pastry, the warmth it had kindled in her chest. When morning came, she moved through her duties with unusual distraction, her reports lacking their typical precision. James noticed the change immediately. During the afternoon shift, he found her standing alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the star field with an expression he'd never seen before, almost like wonder. "Having trouble sleeping?" he asked gently. She turned, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty in her crystalline eyes. "I keep remembering things that never happened to me. A kitchen with yellow walls. The sound of someone humming. How is this possible?" "Emotions have a way of connecting us to experiences beyond our own," James explained, moving to stand beside her. "That pastry wasn't just food. It carried memories, love, tradition." Zephyra's breath caught. Love? The word felt strange on her tongue. Before James could respond, her communication device chirped with an incoming message from the Vorthic Council. Her superior's cold voice filled the air. "Liaison Zephyra. Recent behavioral analysis indicates concerning deviations from standard protocols. You will report for immediate psychological reconditioning upon our arrival." The device went silent, leaving them in tense quiet. Zephyra's hands began to shake. Another impossible response her people had eliminated generations ago. "They're coming for me," she whispered. James stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. "We won't let them take you." "You don't understand," Zephyrah said, her voice breaking in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "If they discover what's happening to me, ... The words died as James gently took her hand in his. The contact sent electricity through her nervous system, and suddenly she was sobbing, great, gasping breaths that shook her entire frame. James pulled her against his chest, his warmth enveloping her as she experienced grief for the first time. "I don't know how to feel," she whispered against his shoulder. "You're learning," he murmured into her ear, "and I'll teach you everything." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Zephyrah understood what the poets meant when they wrote about hearts. Stopping, James's thumb traced her cheek, wiping away tears she didn't know she'd shed. Hidden Hunger's ship's kitchen became their secret sanctuary. In the hours when most of the crew slept, James taught Zephyrah the alchemy of cooking, how flour and water could become bread, how heat could transform simple ingredients into something transcendent. Her analytical mind absorbed the techniques quickly, but it was the emotional resonance that truly captivated her. "Cooking is about more than sustenance," James explained as they worked together on a batch of his grandmother's cookies. "It's about care, about taking time to nurture someone." Zephyrah's hands moved with increasing confidence as she shaped the dough, her enhanced senses picking up subtleties she'd never noticed before. The way James's breathing changed when she stood close to him, the slight tremor in his voice when their fingers accidentally touched. "My people would call this inefficient," she said, but her tone held no conviction. "Maybe efficiency isn't everything," James replied, moving behind her to guide her hands. His chest pressed against her back as he helped her fold the dough, and Zephyrah felt that familiar warmth bloom in her core. She turned in his arms, and the space between them seemed to crackle with possibility. "James," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. He cupped her face in his flour-dusted hands, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering, she closed the distance between them, their first kiss tentative and sweet. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I've been researching," Zephyrah said, her voice husky, "in the archived records of my people. We weren't always like this." James's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Before the Great Conditioning, Vorthik felt everything humans do. Love, joy, sorrow. We chose to suppress it, believing it made us weak." She pressed closer to him, her hands fisting in his shirt. "But what if we were wrong?" Their second kiss was desperate, hungry. James lifted her onto the counter, his hands tangling in her silver hair as she wrapped her legs around his waist. Between heated kisses, she told him about the hidden archives, the poetry her ancestors had written, the songs they'd sung. "Help me remember," she pleaded against his mouth. "Always," he promised, and showed her with his touch what words could never express. They made love there in the kitchen, surrounded by the scents of cinnamon and vanilla, discovering together what it meant to be truly alive. The recipe for rebellionth Vorthik inspection ship arrived like a storm cloud, its angular hull dwarfing the Harmony's edge. Zephyrah stood in the docking bay, her expression carefully neutral as three figures in pristine white uniforms approached. Their leader, Commander Nexus, moved with the same mechanical precision she'd once possessed. "Liaison Zephyrah," Nexus intoned, "your recent performance metrics indicate severe psychological contamination. You will undergo immediate neural restructuring." Zephyrah's heart hammered against her ribs, a sensation that would have been impossible weeks ago. "I am functioning within acceptable parameters, Commander." Nexus's cold eyes studied her face. "Your micro-expressions suggest otherwise. Report to the medical bay." As they moved through the ship, Zephyra caught James's eye across the corridor. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, and she felt a surge of something her people had no name for. Hope. The medical examination revealed nothing. The human crew had helped her prepare, teaching her meditation techniques to suppress her new emotional responses during the scan. But Nexus wasn't satisfied. "You will return with us immediately," he declared. Extended exposure to human irrationality requires complete reconditioning. "Actually," Zephyra said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins, "I have discovered something that may interest the Council." She led them to her quarters, where she'd hidden her grandmother's journal, discovered in the ship's archives after weeks of careful searching. The ancient Vorthic text spoke of a time before the Great Suppression, when her people had created art and music and food with passionate intensity. "This is forbidden knowledge," Nexus hissed. "This is our history," Zephyra countered. "What if the Council was wrong? What if emotions made us stronger, not weaker?" Nexus raised a weapon, but James appeared in the doorway, flanked by security officers. "I'm afraid I can't allow you to harm a member of my crew." The standoff lasted only moments before Nexus and his team retreated, but not before issuing a final warning. "You have 7 days to return to Vorthic space or face the consequences." When they were gone, Zephyra collapsed into James's arms, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "They'll never stop hunting me. Then we'll have to make sure they never find you," James said, holding her close. "I won't let them take you." That night, they held each other with desperate intensity, knowing their time might be running short. Sweet revolution 6 months later, Zephyra stood in the bustling marketplace of New Geneva Colony, her hands steady as she piped frosting onto a batch of her grandmother's apple cinnamon pastries. The small cafe she and James had opened had become something neither of them had expected, a bridge between two worlds. "Order up," James called from the kitchen, his smile bright as he watched her work. Marriage had changed them both, their bond deepening into something that transcended species. The bell above the door chimed, and Zephyra looked up to see a familiar silver-blue face. Her heart stopped. It was Kira, a fellow Vorthic from her old unit, but something was different. The rigid posture was gone, replaced by curious, almost eager movements. "Zephyra?" Kira's voice held emotions that should have been impossible. "We've been looking for you." "We?" Zephyra asked, tension coiling in her stomach. Kira smiled, actually smiled. "The others. Word of your discoveries has spread. There are dozens of us now, maybe hundreds. We're learning to feel again." Tears streamed down Zephyra's face as she realized the truth. The revolution had begun not with weapons or warfare, but with recipes and kindness. More Vorthic began filtering into the cafe, their faces bright with newfound wonder as they experienced their first tastes of human cuisine. James appeared at her side, his arm sliding around her waist. "Looks like we're going to need a bigger kitchen." As the day progressed, Zephyra watched her people laugh for the first time in centuries. They shared stories and food, tears and joy, slowly remembering what it meant to be alive. Children, Vorthic children who had never known emotional suppression, played alongside human youngsters, their laughter echoing through the cafe. That evening, as they closed the shop, James presented her with a small, perfectly frosted cake. "Happy anniversary, my love." Zephyra leaned into his embrace, marveling at how one simple pastry had changed everything. "Thank you for teaching me to taste the stars." Their kiss was sweet with promise, and around them, two worlds slowly learned to love again, one recipe at a time.